Hi there, my name's Ali, and this is the Meng Qi Gesture Arcade. Before I get this video started, I wanted to thank all of my new subscribers. I did not expect this channel was going to grow so quickly, and I really do appreciate you guys. On that note, I am sorry that I haven't uploaded for a little while. I've been going through some personal difficulties, but I'm starting to get it all sorted out, so I'm going to hopefully start uploading more regularly. So definitely stay tuned for those new Orca videos. I'm planning to finish that alphabet series by the end of the month. So without further ado, wait, no, one more thing. I wanted to thank Meng Qi for this because I have been talking to him for a while. He reached out to me asking if I would want to do a video on one of these, and I was thrilled about it because I've loved his work for a long time. And he actually sent me this to review for free, so I wanted to thank him. You should really check out his work. I would highly recommend everything made by Meng Qi. He's really good at making beautiful interfaces for synthesizers. Speaking of which, what is the Gesture Arcade? Now, the Gesture Arcade is not a synthesizer, it's just an interface. It's made specifically for the double knot by lorre-mill. It could work with other banana jack synths. It's intending to work with a 8-volt standard, 0 to 8 volts. So keep that in mind. Obviously the design is going to be really tailored to the double knot, but as you'll see, it does have some useful utilities that you might be able to use in another system to add a little expression. The idea of the Gesture Arcade is to add more expression to your performances with the double knot. The double knot's biggest weakness is its tiny little buttons. As you can see here, they're pretty small and they're easy to kind of accidentally hit wrong. So this allows you to add, through a very clever idea, it allows you to add these gigantic, beautiful arcade buttons, very, very heavy duty, high quality, and it allows you to perform with those instead. It's a lot more predictable and it's a lot more hands-on. In addition, it adds these switches, which add even more performability. So let's get started. Let's see how we can actually use this. Obviously, as you can see, I'm getting power through the Gesture Arcade. The reason that this is done is because the Gesture Arcade is also made to be compatible with the bigger version of the double knot called the Cowboy Colosseum. Something I wish I could have, but I think I'm out of luck on that. They're all gone. There are only 10 of them in existence as far as I'm aware. They're essentially just a double knot with a analog filter in the middle. The problem with it is it didn't have a ground jack on the side like the double knot does. So this allows the Gesture Arcade to share ground with the double knot or with the Cowboy Colosseum. This also opens up some possibilities I'll get into later, but it also makes it so you don't have to stack ground jacks, which is something that gets a little finicky. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to plug in the double knot's power supply here, and then he'll send you this little extender here. It's just a little short cable that's the same on both ends, and you plug it into here and then into the double knot. So it's jumping or daisy chaining power from here to the double knot. All right, so this is how it's getting power. Let's hook up the buttons first. Now the buttons are pretty straightforward. They're basically just replicating what the buttons inside the double knot are actually doing. And it's doing this mechanically. So essentially, as you can see, there's a button input and a button output. The button input is always going to be connected to the button output. So whatever you send to the button input is just going to get passed along to the output. However, if you are holding this button, this one here, either of the inside buttons, obviously this is 2 because it's meant to work with the symmetrical style of the double knot. So both sides are identical, just mirrored. So anyways, press this, and essentially what it's going to do is it's going to disconnect the input from the output. So nothing will come through when you're holding this button. The second buttons on the outside are going to also disconnect the input to the output, but instead of sending nothing through, instead it connects it to a source of, I would assume, 8 volts, or a high gate, essentially. So when you're holding these buttons, the output is receiving a constant high signal. The idea of this, of course, is to act as the shift register on the double knot. So let's try hooking it up here. All right, so the button output, I'm going to go ahead and connect this one to the top side. So the button output is going to go to the shift register input. And that's going to connect them. So now if I press this button, you're going to see that the top register is going to get high gate, and that's going to fill the register once the clock ticks by. Alrighty. Now we got to get the input set up, and for this, you have to think, if you weren't using these buttons, what would you be connecting this to? Because essentially, you're wanting to connect it like this. Traditionally, you like to connect it to the end of a register, so you get a loop. So let's try that. Just connect the input to step 8. And now if I press in a sequence with this button, we will get a 8-step loop. I'm going to speed it up a little. I've got a little reverb going on. That's from the Auto BAM hardware reverb. This isn't really a demo for the double knot, so I figured I might spice it up with a little effects. All right, so we've got this loop going. Now if we want to delete from the loop, we simply hold the enter button, and that will disconnect the input to the output and break the loop. So it's pretty straightforward, but this is so much better than the tiny buttons on the double knot. If you don't own a double knot, you'll not really understand how much of an improvement this is. These buttons are incredible, and it's really satisfying to play with them. You have a lot more fine control over them. So yeah, you can really make it a really performable rhythmic instrument rather than just a set it and forget it drum machine, which is what a lot of people were using the double knot for. Meng Qi is very big on hands-on instruments and interfaces that make the synthesizer more of a human type of instrument. So this is very appreciated. I'm going to go ahead and hook up the other side here. It's the same deal, just remember that it's mirrored. So we're going to connect the output first to the input of the second register, the bottom one. And then we're going to connect the input to step 8 here. So we're going to get 2 8-step loops that can kind of talk to each other. I'm not sure how these are tuned, so I don't know if this will sound good, but let's just go for it. For those curious, by the way, if you press both buttons at the same time, it's basically the same as pressing the enter button and disconnecting, just so you know. It's really good at making kind of continuously changing loops, since you can make little alterations. Just patch out one beat. Really good for slow evolving stuff, but obviously you can perform a lot of different ways with this. Speed up the clock and you can make it even a lot different. slower it is, the easier it is to kind of keep track of what's happening. This is an instrument, after all. It's an interface that you really have to learn and kind of connect with. But once you really connect with it, you can do a lot of really cool stuff and make it more of a, organic instrument. Now, part of the expression that the Gesture Arcade allows comes from the switches as well. Now, the switches are pretty straightforward. They only have one output. That's all that they have. They're really nice heavy-duty switches again. Meng Qi picked some really high-quality parts for this instrument. I should also mention that this lovely wooden box is black walnut. And I love wood on synthesizers or anything synthesizer related. It looks gorgeous next to the double knot, so I like it a lot. All right, so the switches. Let's get a cable connected here. Now the switches are meant to modulate a parameter on the double knot or other synth. So for example, you can connect the output of the switch to the pitch of one of the oscillators. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'll just tune it to whatever amount of FM here. So it's now connected to the pitch there. Now what this switch is doing when it's in the center position is it's connecting ground to that part, or 0 volts. I'm not sure. There's a technical difference. I'm not that great with electronics. All right, so it's connecting ground. So this is the lowest value, basically. So this will be a low note. Now, when we move the switch to the left or right, it will take the corresponding knob here. I didn't mention those knobs. It'll take that knob and send out that amount of voltage. So for example, I think you have a range of 0 to 8 volts here. So I can make it switch. So when it's on this side, it'll be 8 volts. So it'll be a high note. So now when I switch between these, I'm going to make a longer envelope here. And I want to tune that a little different, so I'll just tune it down a little. If you turn the knob while the switch is facing towards this knob, then you can hear it in real time. So I like that combination. Now for a third note, we turn it to the right, and we tune that knob. And you can turn it, once you practice, you can turn it quite quickly. You can make these really cool little gestures, hence the name. Obviously, I'm not the best with this instrument, especially when I have a tripod right in front of me, but you get the idea here. The switches can be used with a lot more than pitch. So let's connect it to something else. One thing I've found that is quite cool to connect the switches to is the decay of the envelope here. Now I'm going to turn it fully to the left, which is the longest possible envelope. And then I'm turning this attenuator, which controls the envelope decay length, all the way up. What that means is that I'll have a full range of control over the envelope value when I have this plugged in. Over here with the FM, I just turned it to whatever, just so I had some kind of FM control with this switch here. So now when I turn this knob, when it's at the middle, it should be a very long envelope. But if I turn it here, it'll go a lot shorter. And if I turn it here, and I turn up this even higher, it'll be even shorter. So now we have some control over dynamics here. I'm going to speed it up a little. just messing around here, but you get the idea. One of the reasons I like patching into the decay is you can actually control these little melodies that you can get from the digital to audio converter here, or digital to analog converter, I'm sorry. If you haven't watched my double knot video, the first one specifically, this may confuse you a little. So if you are not familiar with the double knot, I would recommend checking that video out. Alrighty. Now, so I've got this digital to analog converter connected here. Alrighty. So now when I play here, it's going to have a little kind of melody happening because every step is going to send out a different voltage level, one of 16 different levels of voltage. So, but the thing is, the longer the decay, the more of the little melody we'll hear. You'll see how this works. So that's a 2-note melody. This is just the first note of the melody because it's not, it just closes right away. That's the whole melody. I'm going to turn it down a little. It's a little too high-pitched. So now you can control these little melodies and you can kind of bring them in and out of your rhythm. And of course, you can change the melody just by adding and removing beats. To make it so the melody is not controlled, to make it so the melody is not connected to the rhythm of the shift register, I'm going to connect it, the pitch, to the digital to analog converter of the other shift register. That way we can separate the note ons from the melody, so we can hear a little bit of the control that this switch will give us over the length of the melody. I don't know if that makes sense. You'll see. You get the idea. You have quite a bit of control over the double knot, and of course you can connect to other things too. I could connect the switch output to the FM amount. I could connect the switch output to the speed of the clock. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff. You can even use the buttons in more creative ways if you'd like, just to mix things up quite a bit. Let's try some other stuff here. Just getting everything unplugged. All right. So, same as last time, we're going to connect the output here of the button to the input of the shift register. And then we will connect the input to the oscillator. Now what this will do is it'll give us a pseudo-random sequence because it's being fed by the oscillator. So depending on when the clock hits, it might hit a high point in the oscillator, it might not. It's sort of a form of aliasing, but it can get some cool kind of pseudo-random rhythms. And depending on the ratio between the clock and the oscillator, you'll get different rhythms. Generally, they'll be kind of shifting. So you hear how it's kind of shifting around. Now I can mute it, same as last time here. It's just disconnecting the oscillator from the input. Let go. There it goes. Disconnected. And I can add a little fill by pressing this button because it'll fill it with all ones. Sorry, I hit the mouse tone there. Just keep in mind it's not going to loop because that's not the behavior we're creating. Something else you could do is not even connect it to the shift register at all. This is obviously not the intended use, but this is how you would use it with other synthesizers, and you can of course do this with the double knot as well. Hey, sorry for the interruption in the video there. The tripod fell down. But what I was about to show is that you can use the buttons to interface with things other than just the shift registers. For example, I will use it to control the connection between the FM of an oscillator and a rhythm. So I'll get a rhythm going here. I'm just going to use this here. And now I will connect this. I'm going to be connecting it to this, but through a button. So the button input here, and the button output here. And now connected to the FM input. Now I need to actually get a rhythm going on this oscillator, so I will do that now. I'll make it 6 steps, just be funky. Turn up the pitch. So you hear it's being affected because these 2 points are being connected. The pitch is going to be changed. But if I press this, it's going to disconnect the point, so there won't be any FM. So now when I let go of this, they'll be reconnected. You hear that high note. And if I press this button, it'll send a high voltage. It may not be the same note as the high voltage from the shift register. We'll hear. No, it's a different note. So you get the idea. You can use it in ways other than interfacing with the shift register, but obviously that's the idea. So it's up to you how you'd like to use the Gesture Arcade. To play us out, I am going to show how we can use this in conjunction with the double knot and the moss tone. Ooh, before I do though, I do want to show you a cool little thing I found. So this center piece, you've probably been staring at it the whole time wondering what it is. It's ground. It's just another ground jack. Again, that's more for the Cowboy Colosseum, which doesn't have a ground. However, like I said, it does prevent you from having to stack grounds if you want to connect this to other banana jack gear, like the moss tone. However, if you're not planning on doing that, you can use ground for other things, which are a little more mischievous. Be careful connecting ground to anything. You can create a short circuit if you connect it directly to a source of voltage. So definitely be careful about this. I'm only going to recommend a couple uses, but just be aware that you're creating a short circuit if you connect this to any source of constant voltage. I don't want somebody to get hurt because they're trying to do this. Okay, so I'll connect the ground here to the tempo input. Now, let me get a rhythm here before I do. All right, so let's get it going with these small little buttons. So we got a little rhythm going. Okay, now this is the slowest the clock can go. I'm just going to set a constant beat so you can hear how slow it is. So this is the slowest the clock can go by default. However, watch what happens when I connect ground to the speed input of the clock. And now I'll turn it all the way down. As you can see, we can go very, very slow. Actually, I don't know if it's even going to complete now. We'll find out. I'm going to try moving it just a little bit up. Let's see if I don't know if it's actually going to go. This is very suspenseful. Oh, yep. So it is very, very slow now. As you can hear, numerous seconds long. Very long cycle. Could be useful. Maybe not. I'm going to make it a little longer since we have so much time to work with. I don't know if you'd ever need to go quite that slow. It's kind of insanely slow. But however, this works in reverse as well. You can also make the clock go faster. So let's hear what the fastest clock speed is by using the drone technique I showed in my double knot drone video. I will put a link in the description to both the double knot videos just so you can see them. I'll just put a constant rhythm in here. So this is as fast as the clock can go. So you hear that constant pitch. That's the I just turned down the volume, by the way. You can hear that constant pitch. That's as fast as the clock can go. However, with ground, it can actually go a little bit higher. It's about a tritone higher, but that's still nice. You can extend things a little bit further. That's the main usage I found. You can also connect it to the FM of the oscillators to get a wider range, but they're already really wide ranging, so I don't know if you need to do that. Another cool use if you have a Moss tone is you can connect ground to the FM input of the Moss tone and get extremely slow sweeps. There's other ways to do that, but basically it just lowers the oscillator so much that you just get the noise coming up and down. Sorry, I touched the wire to the Moss Tones VCA in. This is where you got to be careful with ground. Okay, so I'm going to play out. I'm just going to show how this can work in a full setup with a double knot and a Moss tone. By the way, for those who have reached out to me saying that they want a double knot, stay tuned because it looks like lorre-mill is getting ready to make a successor. I'm excited about it. I might want to get one myself to work with my old school one. Alrighty, so let's get this all hooked up. Same as the old school setup that I went over earlier. Just the button output goes to the shift register input, and the button input goes to the shift register output, step 8. I'll connect this one to the other one. Button input goes to, whoops, wrong way. Button output goes to the shift register input. And then the shift register's 8th step goes into the button input. So those are all connected now. So now we can. Just realized I'm still in drone mode. All right, so we got those connected. spice up the rhythm, I'm going to show a technique that I didn't really cover in my moss tone video, I don't think. I'm going to connect one of the rhythms through the inverter on the moss tone. So I'm connecting step 8 here into the inverter input of the moss tone. The inverter is the little triangle. You can't really see it here. And then I'm connecting the inverter output back to the button. So now we're going to get a 16-step loop. The first 8 steps are one pattern, and the next 8 steps are that same pattern inverted. So by default, we're just going to get 8 high steps and then 8 low steps. It's a cool way to expand the rhythms that you can get from the double knot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You get the idea. So if I change the rhythm, it'll change both sides, the high side and the low side. Now I'm going to connect up the double knot. The double knot is going to be fed some of the gates from the shift registers to its key inputs so we can get some melodies going. I've got a microtonal scale set up on the moss tone at the moment, so it'll be a little wonky, but that's what I want. That's the moss tone you're hearing. Doesn't really matter what you connect it to, just play around. I'm going to get these switches hooked up here. I'm going to connect the pitch of this lower one. Got to get it in tune. You can actually use the knobs as a performance tool as well. I like to switch between the knob and another state to get these kind of back and forth glides. Listen. Get the other one hooked up here. I'm going to do the same thing we did earlier. Connect it to the decay. Actually, I'll connect it to the FM just for fun. Interestingly, I found that if you connect ground to the FM input, you actually get a max value, not a low value. I don't know if that's just how it's wired up, but just something to keep in mind. So the real fun in this connection between the double knot and the moss tone is once you start changing the rhythm, because it'll change the melody too. So here we go. Speed it up a little. got a multiple of 8, we'll get more wonky rhythms. Let's try this out. I'm gonna make this a 6-step loop. I'm going to connect this to pitch instead of FM input. Just feeling that more. I'm going to add a little low-pass filtering to the double knot. I have a Waldorf 2-pole up here. If I add some delay, it'll get extra trippy. But I think you get the idea. This really does make the double knot a much more expressive instrument. I hope I've been able to demonstrate how it works, if not have a strong mastery of it. I'm going to need a lot more time for that, but I have a good idea of how much it expands the double knot. Having a good interface really does make a synth so much better. And I'm really glad that Meng Qi decided to do this. If you own a double knot, I would highly recommend this because it really does expand this instrument and make it something that you can really express yourself with instead of just kind of set it and forget it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, stay tuned for future videos. The Orca series is going to be finished soon, and I have something else coming soon. So stay tuned for that. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See ya.